All right, wonderful. Well, we will go ahead and get started. But just a couple more folks here. There we go. Wonderful. So first of all, thank you all for joining us this afternoon and for your interest in the North Carolina Civil Rights Trail. We are very excited to share with you some additional information about it. And do feel free to, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to leave them in the chat. And we also have a question and answer session towards the end of today's session. But I will start off just by introducing myself. My name is Adrienne Yearday, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Associate Director of the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission. And in terms of today's webinar, our agenda for it, I have that depicted here. We're going to go through introductions. What is the trail? We're going to talk through what can be on the trail, who all is able to apply, what the markers themselves look like, how the markers will be placed, and then we'll talk through the entire application process, where the application is located, what materials you will need to gather in order to apply, how you apply, as well as applicant responsibilities. Then we'll also talk through what application review looks like, as well as our advisory committee, in addition to what comes after applying for the program. We'll also talk just briefly about, we have several more upcoming informational sessions this summer. And then again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we will have plenty of time for questions at the end. So feel free to ask away. But to get started, I will start off by introducing the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission. For those who are not familiar, we serve with a mission to preserve, protect, and promote North Carolina's African American history, arts, and culture for all people. We are the smallest division within the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and were created by the North Carolina General Assembly in 2008. We currently have a full-time staff of 3 and a number of contractors who join us throughout the year. For those who might be familiar with some of our work beyond North Carolina Civil Rights Trail, we also have a number of programs, including Freedom Roads, the North Carolina Green Book Project, Oasis Spaces, that currently has a traveling exhibit making its way across the state, as well as our Africa to Carolina project, which is intended to mark disembarkation points from Africa to North Carolina soil. But also in terms of our work, we work across the department to support various other divisions, state parks, state historic sites, our various state museums, in addition to working to support practitioners, likely like yourselves, who are doing this great work across the state. We see it as a big part of our mission to partner, to support, to share resources with folks who are doing this. So do know that it is a possibility for you to reach out to us in that capacity as well. In terms of North Carolina Civil Rights Trail, this is the newest one of our initiatives, and it was founded because we were really seeing a real need within our state to mark this really significant, important, and rich history. You likely know just as well as I do that, while there's significant civil rights history in the Greensboros and, Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, all these large cities across our state, most every small county in our state also has their own civil rights story. And we see this as a real opportunity to share and to mark and to join communities in sharing this rich history. And I want to highlight that I stated communities because that's going to come up later on in our application process, because our intention is that this program is not just a one person in one county who says, I want to put this up. We want to have community support, community interests, folks that are interested in bringing this in to their town, their county, or what have you. I will say as well that this initiative is also a way for us as the commission to think a little bit more expansively about the potential for African American heritage trails and how to shape North Carolina's tourism infrastructure in order to boost local economies. So this is not just, not just a marker program. It's an opportunity to, highlight these sites so that as folks are visiting places throughout the state, they might be going to grab lunch, to go to a cultural center or something like that, but also to be able to pick up little bits of history along the way. And that's something that we see is really important and significant. So you may be wondering, how is it that we are able to accomplish this work? Well, we are not doing it alone. We are very thankful for the support of these folks that you see listed here, primarily the William G. Pomeroy Foundation. They are a foundation who work with a mission to supporting the celebration and preservation of community history. They support a number of national and statewide marker programs, including the National Women's Suffrage Trail. You might be familiar with the Legends and Lore Trail that has a number of markers in North Carolina, in addition to their work facilitating the New York State and Ohio State marker programs. We also do this work in partnership with the North Carolina Office of Archives and History. And this primarily looks like our work with Ansley Wegner, who is the facilitator of the State Historical Highway Marker Program. That is a program that has been around for a number of years, so we are always thankful for Ansley's support and great knowledge when it comes to historical markers within our state in particular. And she also serves on our advisory committee, who we'll take a look at later on in the presentation. We also are grateful to be working with Visit North Carolina on this. The long-term vision for this project is not only to have these sites marked, but also to create driving tours, travel itineraries, really bringing and encouraging folks to go out in this community. And Visit North Carolina has really been a great partner to us in terms of sharing the word of this trail. I do want to call out that currently we are in phase 1 of the trail program, which is from 2020 through 2023. This trail will include a digital map of North Carolina civil rights sites, up to 50 physical markers for community-based civil rights sites. And our hope is that 10 of them will be in hometown strong communities. For those not familiar with Hometown Strong, we'll talk a little bit more about it later on in the presentation, but it is inclusive. We encourage folks from all different communities and counties to apply for this program. So what can be on the trail? Well, all North Carolina Civil Rights Trail markers will designate places, events, or persons of statewide or regional historical significance that are connected to civil rights activities in North Carolina or for the entire United States. So that looks like things that we have listed here: protest, rally, and sit-in sites, birthplace, childhood homes, and primary residences of civil rights icons, churches and spaces where people organized, spaces and places where civil rights icons visited, stayed, and spoke, as well as educational institutions and legal or courthouse-related institutions. And when we say events, we specifically mean events that took place between 1941 and 1976. Now, we've had some question in previous webinars about why this specific time period. This is a time period that was set by the National Park Service in terms of how they reference civil rights history. So we followed their lead in terms of that expertise. However, if you're thinking in your mind, oh gosh, I have an event or I have an individual that I would like to have a trail for, a marker for that is outside of this time period, please do reach out to us and let us know. This is not an end-all be-all. We certainly want to work with folks to make sure that they have successful applications. So we are more than willing to at least have a conversation about it. You'll also notice that I mentioned historical significance in this description. So that's really any person, place, or event that has been recorded, documented, or recognized in a primary or secondary source. So books, journals, newspaper articles, speeches, documentaries, textbooks, things like that will need to, assist in that documentation process. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in terms of the application specifically. We also, as part of that application process, we're asking for folks to, verify this research, make sure that it's documented. I also want to call out that when we say individuals, a standard that has been set by this program is that an individual cannot be considered for a marker until 25 years after they have passed. And as an example of a few markers that were recently awarded, our first 3 markers on the program, I would like to just talk through those. It might get your wheels spinning to some events or places located in your own communities. First off, we have the new Ahoskie Baptist Church in Ahoskie, North Carolina. It was a meeting place, well, and it still is currently standing, a meeting place where church members led civil rights efforts to expand access to public offices, resources, and employment. We also will shortly have a marker at the Adkin High School walkout in Kinston, North Carolina, where students protested a lack of facilities, as well as one in Shelby, North Carolina, marking the Shelby sit-ins, where a group of Cleveland High School students who are part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee organized sit-ins at various uptown businesses. So just a few examples as you're thinking about this process of things that have already been accepted on this trail. In terms of who can apply, we are asking that nonprofit groups with a 501c3 designation, academic institutions, and government entities are eligible for a marker. And we say that because, again, we want to join folks in partnership. And if you are having this moment of, oh gosh, I'm not connected to one of those types of organizations, that's why we're talking about the Civil Rights Program now. We have several months out until our applications are due. Please reach out to us. We have connections across the state. We can certainly introduce folks to, government entities, different historical societies and groups that are located across the state. We want to make sure, again, that you have a successful application. So please do reach out. We'll share our contact information later on in this presentation. I do want to stress that if you are not connected to one of these types of groups, or it is not clearly stated within your application, that the advisory committee will not be able to review your application. So we do ask that you make sure that is clear. I also want to call out that applicants or sites that have already secured a state historical highway marker are ineligible. Now, that being said, we recognize that folks like this marker that we have pictured here for the Hyde County school boycott, that, this is still, it's still certainly a great honor, and it's still something that's very significant, and that there are a number of civil rights related sites that already have a state highway marker. That is totally fine. Those sites will be things that will be highlighted on our digital North Carolina Civil Rights Trail map. So it's not that, they don't get to be on the trail. In a sense, they're being grandfathered into the program, and one can certainly look up their information online. So I do want to call that out and stress that. In terms of the markers themselves, as I mentioned, this is still a relatively new program, and while we do have 3 awardees, they have not yet received their markers. Shortly this summer, our goal is to make sure that those get shipped out to them. As with many things this year with the pandemic, the production process in that has been a little bit delayed. But the hope is that, well, not the hope, we know we've already designed these markers. This is a mock-up of what they will look like in the North Carolina Civil Rights Trail color scheme with the North Carolina logo on it. It will be rather similar to this purple one that you see on the right. That's for the National Votes for Women Trail. Those sorts of dimensions with the civil rights colors. The markers themselves will be 18 inches by 32 inches cast aluminum with a 7-foot aluminum pole. Each marker's title line will allow for 15 characters. The 5 body lines can have 27 characters each, including spaces and punctuation. Each marker will feature the logo again at the top within that circular part of the marker. Now, proposed marker text is something that we do ask for in the application. However, it's an optional portion of the application, though we do encourage folks to write it. It is a good way for us to see, what you think is most important and that you want highlighted on the marker. But we do recognize that, all of these character and the spacing and the certain number count, it's a little bit tricky to work through. And I'll be honest, that's one of those things that has been a learning process for us as well, which is why we're so thankful for advisory committee, because we have some folks who are pros with what we call marker text or marker speak on these. It's certainly a little bit of a different style of writing, just to make sure that, you know, in a limited space, that as much information as possible is able to be shared. So how will these markers be placed? Well, it is required from applicants to provide a letter from the landowner granting permission for the marker to be installed, and that is part of the application package. And within that letter, it's really helpful to make sure that the specific address for the location, so not just, oh, the corner of Main and First Street, but instead, you know, whatever, 100 First Street, whatever that specific address is really helpful for us. We also do ask that marker recipients be responsible for arranging the marker placement with the landowner and or municipal officials if necessary. This will vary from community to community depending on what where you're located and where you're hoping to put the marker. We do recommend that folks get in touch with the roads maintenance department in your area. If you're having trouble identifying who that is, again, do please reach out to us and we can certainly work on making that connection. In some cases as well, if you're not partnering with a municipality for this work, you might be able to get a Boy Scout troop or some other kind of a community organization like that. My understanding is that installing these markers is a pretty straightforward process. If you have a post hole digger, it's something that you probably would be able to do. So again, if you're wondering about the logistics of that, do reach out if you need assistance in arranging that in your specific location. I do want to call out as well that markers cannot be installed within the state right-of-way. That is something that NCDOT has put down as a restriction. In terms of applying, how do you apply? What does that process look like? Well, I do recommend you taking a look at our website. I do have the link listed here, so I can certainly share it towards the end of the presentation as well in the chat. We have our how to apply section, as well as a downloadable application that is listed there. That link will open you up into a PDF where it goes through the entire document. In terms of the cycle that we are currently in for the trail, applications are due October 31st, 2021. But we more than encourage folks, if you have the opportunity, feel free to get your applications in early. We already have received, I believe, 2 or 3 for this round of the program. And it is really an opportunity for us to make sure that there's plenty of time to kind of do a pre-screen of your application before submitting it to the advisory committee. That way, if there are little bits and pieces of your application that might be missing, our Civil Rights Trail coordinator can make sure to reach out to you and say, hey, can you make sure to get this additional item to us by October 31st? And if that won't count against you, again, we want to make sure that folks have successful applications. That being said, if something is missing and it is submitted on October 31st, because that is the deadline, it's a little bit tricky for us to be able to make any additional allowances in that case, because we do need to submit the applications to the advisory committee at that time. Now, we've talked some about, this application, but what do you actually need? What is this full list? And again, this is information that's located on our website as well. But primary sources, that's things like letters, deeds, newspaper articles, meeting minutes, etc. Really things that were documenting or describing the event at the time that it occurred. We also asked for secondary sources, so things like published scholarly articles or books, things that were written after the time of the event, but describing it and also helping to state why it was significant. For both of these primary and secondary sources, we do ask that folks include photocopies or scans of them in their application. It is helpful for us so that we can see what resources that you're looking at, and it's important to the advisory committee as well. We do ask that folks include a bibliography listing these primary and secondary sources. Now, we don't worry too much about what the formatting is for the bibliography, MLA, APA, Chicago. That's not really a big preference for us. We just ask that you include a listing of the sources that you're including in the application. We also ask that folks include a historical essay. Now, the essay can be as long or as short as you feel it needs to be, really how long you feel that you need to answer the question and state the historical significance of whatever event or person that you are hoping to honor. Really, why do you think that your community should have this? Why does it deserve it? We also need in your application, again, a clear affiliation with a nonprofit academic institution or entity. That can look like a letter of support and signatures from those various parties. We also ask for a letter from a landowner and or municipal officials granting that permission. Now, in some cases, depending on your circumstance, you might have one letter that covers both that affiliation with the government and landowner participation. I know specifically for Cleveland County, Shelby, the site that is currently on the trail, their trail application was in partnership between the city, the town, the local museum, as well as their Main Street Corporation. So really just the nature of their application, all of that was already very, very clear in the way that they chose to apply. We also, again, as I mentioned on a previous slide, ask for folks to include proposed marker text. Again, you don't have to worry too much about marker count, but it is another way for us to highlight and know, okay, this is a piece that they for sure want to make sure is represented on their marker. Where should you submit your application? So you can do it in two different ways. We do have an email address for the program. It is nccivilrightstrail@ncdcr.gov. If you are emailing your applications, we do ask that folks submit their materials, the primary sources, the secondary, all of those things that we listed on the previous page, that those are included in a Google Drive or a Dropbox and not just as attachments. We found that that just makes it a lot easier for us to make sure that your materials are organized and that we can get them seamlessly to the advisory committee. You're also more than welcome to submit your application via USPS. We do ask that you submit it to the address that we have listed here, which is also available on our website. And in that case, we ask for scanning purposes because we will need to scan your materials into the system that you use paper clips rather than staples. Where or who to direct your questions to. I keep saying that throughout this process. Reach out to us, let us know, ask us these questions. Let us know through our email address. This is at nccivilrightstrail@ncdcr.gov. Currently, we are in transition with our trail coordinators. We have a young woman, Ashley Adams, who will be joining us this month and be taking on this role. However, in the meantime, we are keeping an eye on that email address. So make sure to ask us. Again, I want to stress, we want folks to have successful applications and make sure that they feel supported and have the materials that they need. So feel free to let us know if something is unclear or if you're having trouble putting some aspect of the application together, just reach out. It's not a big deal. In terms of applicant responsibility beyond the application, I do want to call out that this program covers the fabrication and shipping of the markers. Comes in a big old shipping crate, and we will certainly talk through folks awarding markers, what that process looks like. In terms of the installation, maintenance, and replacement of these markers, should something happen to them, that is something that is currently the responsibility of the applicant. I also want to call out again, we mentioned that letter from the landowner granting permission, making sure that that's clear, as well as arranging marker placement. That is not something that we at the program do. That is something that is the responsibility of applicants. Now, once you have submitted your application, you might be wondering what this application review process looks like. Keep mentioning advisory committee. Who are they? What are they doing? Well, when we were putting together this program, we felt it was really important to assemble an experienced group of committee members who are really civil rights content experts from across the state. They have diverse backgrounds and they represent HBCUs, public and private universities, as well as a few folks that work in the public history realm at various museums. So I have those folks listed here. You'll see folks from the Museum of the Southeast American Indian, John Hope Franklin Research Center for African American History and Culture at Duke University, in addition to folks from Elizabeth City State, Livingstone, Johnson C. Smith. Again, that representation was really important to us. I will say that we had our first meeting of the advisory committee in January, and these are an enthusiastic group of folks. They're excited and they are ready to see your applications. And they bring, you know, a level of enthusiasm that helps make this process, you know, really exciting. You know, it's great to have such a knowledgeable group of folks with an attention to detail to help contribute to this process. And that being said, I want to stress again, you know, when you're submitting the application, myself, Ashley, who's going to be our trail coordinator, it's not up to us of whether or not you are accepted. Ultimately, it's the decision of the advisory committee on whether or not applications are able to move forward or not. In terms of submission and notification, as I've mentioned, we're currently in round 2 of the application cycles. This is a period that started in March and the final submission date is October 31st, 2021. Those who are submitting during this time period will be notified whether or not they are receiving a marker in November of 2021. So depending on when you submit, not a horribly long time to wait in terms of that process. If you're unable to submit during our current cycle, we do invite you to take a look at our round 3, which will be opening up in February of 2022 and running through next August. And then that notification period will be in September of 2022. During this period, we will be awarding a maximum of 20 markers. If for whatever reason your application does not result in a marker award, we do invite you to reapply up to 1 time. Again, we want folks to have successful applications, and we don't want to just say, oh, that application was denied and not give you any reasoning. So please do reach out and ask if you had any specific questions about your application and feedback. Oftentimes, especially from the advisory committee, we take great notes of, was it a unanimous vote? Did everyone say it wasn't accepted, or was it a split vote? And, you know, was it due to missing, you know, they would like some additional information or something like that? We want to make sure that that information is relayed to our applicants. Pardon me. Sorry about this. The joys of working from home. Absolutely. All right. So what comes after the application process? As I mentioned, you'll be notified during this current cycle of your application status by November of 2021. And again, we do invite folks to reapply if they do not receive it. And then at that point in time, if you are awarded a marker, our team will then work with you to finalize the text for a marker and to arrange its delivery to you. Again, you'll then be responsible for arranging the marker installation with the landowners and municipal officials if necessary. And we also want to let you know that we're happy to offer guidance around what organizing a marker dedication ceremony might look like. We are at a time where, you know, the pandemic is certainly less of a concern, especially for an outdoor ceremony. So that's a wonderful way to have an event in person. But we have seen a number of wonderful virtual dedication ceremonies. So that's something that we certainly encourage as well and can give you recommendations and resources for. Again, the costs associated with the physical marker and shipping are covered by the program. And then last but not least, after this process, your site will be added to the North Carolina Civil Rights Trail digital map and available for folks to take a look at on our website. As I mentioned earlier, we do have upcoming informational webinars available for you. So if there are folks in your community or your colleagues you think would find it valuable to attend one of these live sessions, I do encourage them to join us on July 8th from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Also, we recognize that that might be a better time for folks who are working and unavailable to join us in the middle of the day on a weekday. I also want to call out specifically that we do have office hours starting next week. So June 14th through June 18th from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., as well as in July 12th through 16th from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. We are open for you to make appointments with us to talk specifically about your application. And this can take place over phone or Zoom, depending on your preference. We ask that folks submit that you can register for one of these sessions online, and I'll share a link for that in the chat shortly. As well, I'll call out, if you're not available in any of these times, that's totally okay. Again, reach out to our email address that I'll be sharing in the next slide and let us know. We can have some flexibility in scheduling this, but we did want to call out that these are times that we have reserved specifically for these types of conversations. Last but not least, we have not set an official date for this yet, but in August or September time, we will also be scheduling a workshop virtual webinar type thing where we will specifically be walking through step-by-step what it looks like to put together your application. So if that's something that you think would be valuable, please do keep an eye out on your email. We will be sending all the folks who register for these sessions that additional information. So hopefully that you can join us at that time, again, if you think it would be valuable for you. All right, and at this point, I do want to open up for our question and answer portion of the presentation. I'm going to look at the chat in just a moment. I know that our director, Angela Thorpe, has been keeping an eye on that throughout our presentation. But again, as I said, reach out to us, NC Civil Rights Trail at ncdcr.gov, as well as our website. That is where you will find a bunch of the same information I've shared here, but also even more that will help you in your application process. I will note as well that today's session has been recorded. So if you missed the first few minutes of it or have a colleague or someone that you'd like to share this recording with, please do feel free. It will also be available on our website and on our YouTube page. But with that, I will take a look at the chat here. Here we go. All right. Wonderful. So we have a message from Becky who is asking about the training of the 54th Coast Artillery who trained at Fort Fisher in 1941. They were an African-American unit, and she was curious as to whether or not they were eligible. So Becky, if I'll be honest, I'm not specifically familiar with their story, but it does fall within our time period, and that is certainly something that sounds of great interest to us. So yes, I would say that that certainly can be eligible. And again, if you're having any additional questions about that application process, feel free to let us know and we can assist you more on that. And it looks like we have shared the website and our email address again in the chat. And we had a question from Mary that Angela has answered about whether or not awardees that receive a marker in November will be listed on our website. Yes, they will. They will be profiled on our website as well as included within our digital map that we discussed. And I also do want to call out that Angela put a note in the chat about if you represent any of the hometown strong counties. We made mention of that we really, we want to encourage that we see applications from folks. Again, it's important to us not just to highlight the big cities, the stories that we are already familiar with, but those untold stories are really significant. So to call out the specific hometown strong counties, we have Anson, Burke, Caswell, Edgecombe, Graham, Halifax, Lenore, Madison, Pasquotank, Robeson, and Swain counties. So if you're in those communities or know of folks in those communities who might be interested in something like this, please do reach out, connect them to us, and we would love to take a look at their applications. So at this time, I am going to go ahead and stop my screen share. And again, if you have any additional questions, if you want to leave them in the chat, you want to raise your hand on the little virtual thing, we can allow you to unmute at that time and hopefully assist you in whatever your questions may be. And you don't have to all ask at once. But I'm going to go ahead and pull up an additional link for you here and make sure that I have that shared in the chat. Again, I want to call out this. So the link that I'm going to be sharing is for our office hours that are taking place next week. Again, an individualized phone call or Zoom call, depending on what your preference is, to make sure that you have that information. That is the link that I'm sharing with you right now. There we go. Any additional questions, any comments? If anybody has any other kind of initial thoughts about, oh, here's a site within my community that I'm thinking about submitting an application for, you know, we have this time until just about 1 o'clock or so. If you want to share that with us, that's great. We'd love to keep an eye out for your application. Oh, I see Sarah. Sorry about that, Sarah. Absolutely. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks. This was really helpful. I appreciate you doing this. One question I had in terms of how this connects with the state highway marker program, do applicants for the Civil Rights Trail markers have to demonstrate statewide significance as part of the historic significance piece? Or, and forgive me if you already mentioned that, I missed a tiny bit of the beginning.
No worries. No, and that's a great question, especially for folks who are more familiar with our larger state highway marker program. So it can certainly demonstrate statewide significance. That's wonderful. That's great. But if it only demonstrates community significance, then that's totally fine for us as well. Again, we want to join communities in this application process and recognize, I'll say, for example, like the Shelby sit-ins who currently have a marker on our trail. That was not necessarily a movement that spread, you know, many counties wide, and that's something that folks were highly familiar with. It was a localized event that happened over a very short time period, but it was significant in their community and part of civil rights, so we felt that it deserved a marker. Now, some of the other ones might be a little bit larger, and that's excellent too, but we recognize, especially with this history, that that statewide significance is a little bit of a tricky piece.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you, Sarah.
Can you see me?
I see Joe. Joe, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. My name is Joe Holt. Hi, Dr. Thusen.
Hi, good to see you.
All right. My question has to do with the requirement that the person be deceased for at least 25 years before we could submit for them. Suppose you have a family and maybe there are two persons who meet that requirement, but one does not.
So that's a great question. And with that requirement, there are some ways that you can kind of play around with your application. So I would say in that case, the two folks that meet that requirement, they can specifically be mentioned by name, whereas the other one, it's a little bit trickier. But I will say what we have seen, and this is similar to the state highway marker program, is that there might be a way to work around that. So say those individuals were involved in a landmark court case, or for example, with our marker at the New Ahoskie Baptist Church, there was a church leader who was very significant in their movement. And my understanding is that he does not meet that requirement, or I believe he might currently still be with us. But while he's not mentioned by name, his work and and his community that he is involved in is highlighted on that application. So it's kind of a balance. It's a little bit of a tricky thing. if you want to reach out to us more specifically with those individuals' names and whatnot, we can certainly have a more in-depth conversation about what that might look like for you all and your community's marker.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Any other questions for you folks? Again, feel free to put them in the chat if that's something you're more comfortable with, or feel free to, raise your hand or unmute at this point. We have, just about 18 minutes here for any additional questions, if that is helpful to you.
Adrian, this is Demetrius Haddock.
Hi, Demetrius. How are you doing today?
Doing very well. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
I was wrestling with forming my question. I just had a series of events just kind of ricocheting around my head. Fayetteville State was, and Fayetteville State students were intimately involved, of course, during that time frame. Of course, they over like that first 10 sit-ins that occurred, 9 of them were in North Carolina, and Fayetteville was in that kind of that string of sit-ins starting in 1960.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we had a whole series. Our former chancellor at Fayetteville State was the lead for this kind of a desegregation movement in downtown Fayetteville. So I'm just thinking, because I got on late, so I missed a lot of your early presentation. So I have very little context. I was trying to read the website. So if you could kind of just a brief, quick synopsis of what you're driving to do, and what and how we could probably get something like that identified, or what it looks like.
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, Fayetteville State, there are certainly a number of rich events, individuals, and things like that that could be a part of this trail program. As I said, this session is recorded, so you can certainly take a look back at that recording, and I will send it to you. But just as a quick overview, we talked about what is able to be on the trail. So things like protests, rally, and sit-in sites, birthplace, childhood homes, and primary residences, churches, spaces where people organized, places where civil rights icons may have stayed or visited, educational institutions, legal and courthouses. What we are asking that's a little bit unique about this program versus the state highway marker program is that we do ask for folks to make sure it's displayed in their application that they are connected to a 501c3, an academic institution, or a government entity. So in your state, in your case, Demetrius, I believe that you have a 501c3 designation, and or if you did a application in collaboration with Fayetteville State, that would certainly be, you'd be in a good spot to put a marker together. And we ask that because we're hopeful that it's not just an individual in a community that wants it, but that a community as a whole is hoping to have a marker and to be supportive and hoping to mark this history. Not sure what else I can kind of do as like a quick little overview. A lot of this information again is available on our website. That is the aahc.nc.gov/NC Civil Rights Trail. And again, we do have office hours coming up next week, Monday through Friday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. So if you want it's the most recent link that I shared in the chat to schedule a time with us on phone or on Zoom to have a one-on-one discussion about what you're thinking about for your application. We are more than open to having those conversations. Oh, and Angela just shared those again for us. Again, that we want to stress that multiple sites, people, and events can be marked as well. We've also had folks submit multiple applications. So if you're thinking, oh gosh, there's this event, talking about a place like Fayetteville or Fayetteville State, there are numerous events, and I'm sure individuals that can be marked. feel free to submit a few applications. We
Okay.
don't have a limit.
Yes,
We
that's
do
what I
it-
was concerned about. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
No
you.
worries. Yeah, there's not a limit. We do recognize though that, you know, it does take a little bit of time to put your application together. So if it's more feasible for you to do, you know, a few this time with an eye towards doing a few more the next round, then that's totally fine as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. Well, again, folks, we've got, you know, about 13 more minutes here. If you don't have any more questions, you're more than welcome to sign off. If you want to stick around, feel free. I see a few folks that we know of in our network from Humanities Council. I see Rodney Dawson joining us here, Sharon Bryant. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let us know.
One more question.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Holt.
Just wanted to be sure that I heard correctly. This has to be in conjunction or in association with a 501c3 organization, cannot be submitted without it being an association with such an organization. Is that right?
So it can be a 501c3, an academic institution, or a government entity. So
Okay.
any school that you want to partner with could certainly do this, whether that's, you know, elementary on up to universities. Also government, so your town, your county. And in terms of 501c3s, if you're not sure who may or may not have one or who that might be in your community, we can certainly help you in identifying that. Historical societies, alumni associations, even you might have like a downtown association. Oftentimes those sort of churches, those sorts of groups have a 501c3.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Got some thanks for folks. Not a problem. That's what we're here for. Again, our goal is for folks to have successful applications. So we can use this time however you would like. Thank you for the folks from NC Humanities who joined us this afternoon. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye. All right. I'll give it just a few more minutes here. And if we don't have any more questions, again, feel free to email us, schedule a time for office hours, take a look at our website, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you, Adrienne.
Thanks, Angela.